I'm still a really big believer in coming to art school, as much as, I could easily argue for the opposite, but I actually am a real believer, sincerely, because you find a community, and that's what you need. When you're young and you want to enter into the world, you come to art school and you find this incredible community, and you work in this incredibly resourced environment to figure out who you are as a maker. It's a bit of a privilege and a joy.
Welcome to the Research and Reason podcast. Join us as we discuss the latest research, news and opinion from academics in the Faculty of Arts and Education at the University of Auckland.
Kia ora koutou, ko Julianne Evans tōku ingoa. I'm Julianne Evans, the Media Advisor for the Faculty of Arts and Education, and today I'm talking to artist and educator Fiona Jack, who is the head of school and an associate professor at Elam School of Fine Arts, where she's taught since 2007. Fiona's artist practice ranges from large-scale public commissions to collaborative community projects, which consider socio-political issues and look to the past to understand the present. She has curated major exhibitions and her art writing has been widely published. Tēnā koe, Fiona. Great to have you here.
Hey Julianne, how are you?
Very good. Let's start by talking a bit about you, because I think a lot of people want to know about how you are as an artist and how you've come to be where you are.
Well, I started it with a graphic design degree actually back out of school, and quickly came to realise that I was going to be fairly lousy working in a corporate context or a commercial context, and I had ambitions to, I guess, be a bit more broad in my creative practice. So I started to be drawn a lot to public spaces. So I started doing some early billboard works and put posters and things that sort of ended up wandering me in the territory more of the fine arts, I suppose you could say. I mean, they are definitely design terminologies too, but I guess I sort of drifted more towards fine arts. So eventually started teaching in an art school, and then realised that I would actually like to go back and deepen my practice. So I went off to California to do my master's at CalArts, and spent about 5 years living in Los Angeles, which I loved.
How was that? It must have been so much fun.
It was amazing, and it was an incredible education I had there too at CalArts. I loved every minute of it, and stayed on a bit longer, and then eventually moved back to New Zealand to start working at Elam, where I've taught for I think 17 years or something now, and the last 4 of which I have been the head of school. So that's been quite a different job than the years previous. It's a lot more leadership, a lot more administration, but also working to really think about the art school and what it is today, and how we kind of keep moving with the times and keep changing to suit what students need.
Yeah, because it's so interesting, isn't it? I think we were talking earlier about what people think of when they think of a School of Fine Arts. Mm-hmm. I imagined that you would have to be a very good student, that you'd have to have a beautiful portfolio, in photography or in painting or in something similar, that, if you were coming straight out of school, the chances of you ever getting into such a place would be rare. And if you did, you'd be delighted. And it would just feel like a very competitive environment where it was a bit cutthroat and lots of people were trying to get in. Is it still the same today?
It used to be like that, but it hasn't been like that for some time, and that's for everyone in New Zealand, not just for Elam. I think there's just not as many people going to art school, but also there are other reasons why we don't even have a portfolio for Elam anymore, which you may gasp and wonder why on earth that is, but it's because it's for a lot of good reasons, really. Like arts education in high schools now is excellent in some areas, and it's really dwindling in others, just due to resourcing and government funding, prioritisations. And so what we were experiencing is just that some kids, if they aren't exposed to art in high school, and we were demanding a portfolio, meant that that was the end of their artistic journey, and we just didn't want that to happen. We wanted anyone who really wanted a career in the arts to be able to think about coming to Elam if they really wanted to. So we scrapped the portfolio, but we also noticed that over time, sometimes people who were coming in with really strong portfolios weren't necessarily the kids who thrived in the university context, and the opposite was true. Sometimes kids who barely had anything would actually just come to life within the diverse context of the university. So I guess we just we nurture people on their own terms now rather than a factory that pumps out art stars. It's not like that anymore. I mean, we still have a lot of really accomplished artists who emerge from Elam, but we have people who do a huge range of things now. So people come to Elam because they want to be a teacher, or they come to Elam because they want to start an Instagram business. I mean, people come on their own terms, and we sort of support and nurture that journey with them. So it's really different and more open and more inclusive and really fun, I think. Because, what we see on the first day of Elam, I always love the first day when all the first years turn up, because what happens is they've often been kids who are unique in their schools, or sort of find
who might not have fitted in, maybe.
Yeah, who find themselves in their own journey, and they come to Elam and they look around and there's all the other kids like them, and it's this glorious moment, really, where they really find their community, and then they walk together for their whole lives, really.
Yes, of course, because you do think of an art student as a certain type, don't you? I mean, they're kind of, central casting would make them in with kind of slightly unusual clothes or particularly unique ways of presenting themselves.
Yeah, yeah, the outfits are always great. We learn a lot.
Is still the case?
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of planning that goes into outfits in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, it's great. I just feel so lucky to constantly get to be around these beautiful young people on their creative journey. It's pretty exciting.
And what are they doing? Are they doing everything that they would normally be doing? Sculpture, photography, printmaking? I mean, are there all sorts of other things I don't know about that they might be doing?
Yeah, we have. We still have all the workshops at Elam. I think there's sort of been some myths that we got rid of our print studio or we got rid of our photo dark rooms. None of that's true. We have everything still. We have even a foundry. We have wood shops. We have print studios, we have endless computer labs, 3D printers, ceramic printers. We have an incredible storehouse of fun things. And so students just manoeuvre through all of those courses and workshops and studios and find their own way. And we purposefully don't have departments because we don't want students to have to sign up to be a painter or to sign up to be a photographer. We want them to be able to do both or find their own way or change their mind. So some other schools do departments and that works for some students, but we don't. And but so a student can still come to us and be a painter for the entirety of their time almost at Elam. We just don't call it a department. They just sort of find their own way. Yeah, but because a lot of students want to really kind of work across a number of mediums.
Try things out.
Yeah, try things out and deepen their practice later, like at master's level or PhD level. That's when people tend to focus more sometimes.
I'm quite
Not always.
Delighted to find that out, actually, because I thought that perhaps you might come in as a photography student and that's what you do for 3 years.
No, well, my theory is that's maybe where that myth arose, that we'd got rid of some of that technology, because when we moved away from departments, I think maybe people thought that we moved away from the technology, which we absolutely didn't. It's absolutely all there. We've got technicians running those workshops. It's a thriving maker space at Elam. It's just that it's not in departments. So, yeah.
Do you do a lot with digital
as
well?
Yeah, we have lots of all sorts. We've got big digital photography print labs now, because the dark rooms are beautiful, but they're getting pretty expensive for students to work in and complicated. We have a big digital print lab, and we have lots of computers. We've got a course in considering computer programming as an art material. That's been pretty exciting. It's an online course, our first online course. So students don't even have to come to campus once for that course. So they sort of learn how to understand coding as a material for artistic practice. So they're making videos or audio. It's pretty great. It's run by Leo Baldwin-Ramut, who also teaches in the design program. So, yeah.
Very good. What about for your own work? How have you evolved your own practice over time?
Well, I guess in many ways. I mean, I still have this really strong interest in what would be considered not traditional art spaces. So I do show in galleries, but I'm often more drawn to community spaces or public spaces or I guess sort of things that can move around the world in a different way, posters, forms that are a bit more transient. And so Yeah, my practice has probably changed a bit over the years. Being a teacher, I've just become more and more interested in pedagogy as a part of artistic practice as well, and thinking about dialogue as shaping artistic practice. And I've also recently developed quite a strong interest in ceramics, which in the beginning was sort of a really material sideline practice, but it is sort of slowly creeping into my art practice a little bit too. So.
In what way?
Well, I've had a long interest in sort of the tools of resistance and commemoration, so things that we use in society to kind of symbolise our values and visions. So banners in protest marches or memorial halls, kind of creating a social hall as a memorial to war as opposed to a obelisk. I always found those kind of tendencies fascinating, and I've made various projects about those things over the years. And the ceramics, there's a strong tradition, particularly in, I guess, in Europe or more the United Kingdom, to commemorate significant labour movement activities as ceramic objects. So I've become fascinated.
I've never heard of that.
Haven't you? Yeah,
No,
yeah. So I'm fascinated by
What would be an
that.
example of that?
Well, so if you were to go to the Marx Memorial Library in London,
Yeah.
the whole stairwell from one floor to the other is lined completely solidly with plates that commemorate miners' strikes.
Oh,
So each strike has a plate. I mean, it's quite a wonderfully bizarre phenomenon.
yeah.
We know it in New Zealand if the visit of the Queen in the 1950s
Yes.
or whatever would be a plate. So they've sort of taken that a lot further as a
Yeah.
concept. So every sort of zeitgeist act of resistance that a society might have, whether it be, maybe like something like Black Lives Matter back in the 1950s, if that had happened then, would have had a range of cups. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of, I guess, the parallel that you could
Yeah.
draw, when something sort of, or like the anti-slavery movement is the clear example in the UK. There was lots of cups and jugs and plates that commemorated that as a movement, which is fascinating.
It is.
Yeah, so I'm kind of interested in that because I guess it follows on from my interest in banners because they often have a sort of trade union and activist history as well. So, yeah, so that's where the ceramics is starting to kind of creep in a bit into the same dialogue. But historically, I guess I've just been interested in ceramics because I just sort of love the community of ceramics as well. I'm always interested in working with people, makers, communities sort of that are active and lively and find their own terms to be creative communities, not necessarily reliant on gallery systems to sort of show work. So these active communities of makers are always firing wood-fired kilns together, making work, swapping work. There's a sort of different currency and a different agency, which I really enjoy about the ceramics community.
And they're not reliant on other people approving of them in a way, are they?
In
I
some
suppose?
ways,
Although
yeah.
they need buyers, I guess.
Buyers, but also just things sort of travel differently. You sort of, as an artist, you don't necessarily get someone texting you in the morning saying they're enjoying having coffee out your cup.
No.
There's a sort of different, there's a different set of interrelations with ceramics that I quite enjoy.
Yeah, very tactile.
Yeah,
and,
very personal or something. Yeah.
And you've worked with communities, haven't you, over the years, collaborating on projects. What would be one of those that you've done?
I did a project about at Artspace a few years ago working with Sue Bradford, the New Zealand activist and former politician, and we made a project in relation to a group that she founded in the 90s called Kotari, and it's an education centre, well, she founded with others, and I worked with the whole collective in some ways, and we did a project where we ran a series of workshops with people making rocks out of clay as they were engaged in these political discussions, and it was an idea of kind of what would these discussions be like if people were sort of engaged in another activity as they were talking about these sort of heated political issues, and so they draw on a lot of Freudian pedagogical practices to kind of have inclusive and open dialogue on these issues.
Is that Paulo
Freire,
Freire?
yeah. And so we did this series of workshops, about 12, I think, over the course of a year, where out of that, I think, participants generated about 5,500 rocks. So
wow.
we asked people to kind of we gave them a lump of clay and we asked them to sort of shape the clay into little rocks as they were engaged in these discussions. And then they all got wood fired and they got scattered across the gallery floor, and people who visited the exhibition could take them away. So it was sort of just this idea of kind of this creation and generation, but then they would redisperse. So,
Wow. And did people come and see them? And...
Yeah, we had hundreds of people participate in the workshops, and then about half the rocks got taken from the gallery. So, yeah, it was pretty exciting. Yeah,
because another thing you've done, and I was just looking at that before, it was asking people at what point would they move into action on something if they were. What would motivate them to care about a cause, I think, was that, and then you created this amazing big mural out of that. Can you tell me more about that?
That was a painting kind of project at the Christchurch Art Gallery, and it was about trying to think about a tipping point for people, I suppose. And I've thought about this a lot over the years. I think it's an interesting one. I was listening to a podcast the other day talking about when people can arrive at a moment of moral clarity, and I don't know if that's the answer, but it's almost like I wonder if that's it, where people sort of have to arrive at a sense of clarity about their perspective on something before they'll take steps towards doing something about it. I'm not entirely sure, or whether it's a sort of a communal movement in that direction. I mean, I haven't thought about that project much since then, and it's not a recurring theme for me, but...
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Was it red? It
was
a very big red work.
Yeah.
Quite large.
Yeah.
And that's what it became.
It's what it turned into. I had no plan. It just became that.
And where was it displayed?
Outside the Christchurch Art Gallery. Yeah.
Do you teach this kind of thinking to your students? Do you have a course that provokes these sorts of ideas yourself, or are these all just sort of ideas that are around and about that students can pick up on?
At the moment, I'm more being the head of school, and I'm working with PhD students, so PhD students who have related interests to my research. But in the past, I have, I mean, a few years ago, I managed to get the poster company Phantom Bill Stickers.
I know them. Yeah,
to partner with me on a course, and so I think I had about 20 students in the course, and they all the project was to sort of figure out how to visually speak in public space, and so every student was sponsored by Phantom to produce a series of posters, which I
think I might have seen around the place.
You probably did, It was so we sort of did, of course, lots of sort of iterative development of those works in the studio, first of all with large pieces of paper and charcoal, and then working into sort of spoken word, and then thinking about context and what they might want to speak about, and them clarifying their position on issues and trying to establish what they wanted to say about the issue, and understanding what other artists had done in terms of public work that might be posters or billboards. And so it's sort of always a bit of, in the studio, we're always doing a bit of looking around at what others do, then coming back to ourselves and our context and thinking, and then looking around again, and then testing an idea. So, and so we did that, and I think for the whole semester, and then by the end, all of their posters got put all around Auckland. It was pretty great.
How great.
Yeah.
And so they were limited by just the space of a poster, weren't they?
Yeah, they
like
were...
Like A3 size
No,
or
they
something?
were AO. They were the huge ones.
Oh, the huge big ones?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really exciting for
And
a
they
lot of them.
found places all over the city to put them up?
Yeah, well, Phantom put them up, so that was the sponsorship. They put them up everywhere. It was so great. And, there was all sorts sort of from illustrations of faces to, text works to photography works. The students got free rein to do what they wanted. It was pretty great.
And very diverse,
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. So, yes, I'm wherever I can. I mean, sometimes when it's teaching, we sort of have to teach something that is a bit more general, but sometimes we get to focus the course onto really what we're interested in, and that's always a real treat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get involved with art as therapy at all, or does anyone teach that particularly?
Not at Elam necessarily, but we are looking towards the possibility of joining into a newly developed Masters of Creative Arts Therapy that's being formed in the university. So once that's sort of underway, we might look to be able to contribute to that in some way, because it's a really important area and a growth area. Yeah.
And it could be so widely applied to so
Absolutely.
many things.
Yeah.
I mean, my mother, for example, has got dementia, and I know there's been things done with people in those situations that are helpful in terms of expressing themselves in ways that words have escaped them. But they
Yeah,
can
well,
express themselves in music and art. Yeah.
I know that people who've been through Elam have moved into that as a field, and so have, students of ours have worked with Mapura Studios and different other sort of creative arts therapy and healing sort of services. So, yeah, it's something we're definitely interested in. We just sort of have limited capacity sometimes, but we want to grow in that area. It's a really important area.
It is. And you, considering all the things you're doing, you're also doing things with harakeke with flax, aren't you? Isn't there an interesting Indigenous artistic practice going on at the moment?
Yeah, well, when we redesigned the Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree about 5 years ago, and in doing that, we made a range of what we call 15-point courses, which won't mean anything to some people, but they are sort of the smaller of the university-sized courses, and they are to be explicitly exploring a medium. So we might have one of those in painting, or we might have one in photography. And so students will kind of go deep into a technology. So as opposed to a sort of broad studio practice, they'll focus on a set of technologies related to that course. And so we wanted to bring in some Ngātoi courses, so courses that brought in Māori material practices. And so one of the courses is called, I can't remember the name of it, but it's Ngātoi Takitaki, and then it's a sort of fibre and textile focus. So for that, what we were doing is encouraging students to use harakeke and other fibrous plants to weave and to learn traditional weaving methodologies, but then to move into a more contemporary collaborative version of those. I mean, I think if you look on the Elam Instagram page, you'd see some photographs of the work from that course.
I think I might have seen it. Yeah.
And they're
fantastic.
they're really great because the students, we've had a range of people working and teaching into those courses over many years, but incredible people who've brought incredible skill and mana into those courses. And one of the I guess if you started by asking me about the harakeke, well, one of the things
Which
wanted
is flax
to,
for people who
flax,
who aren't familiar with that word.
So one of the things that we wanted to do was make a cyclical resource, really. So we approached the artist Maureen Lander and asked her for some advice on which harakeke plants we might plant at Elam, and so she helped us source some of the appropriate harakeke from the Auckland Botanic Gardens, and so they donated us some harakeke, and we had the gardeners at the University of Auckland plant a pā harakeke. We've actually planted two now because
flax garden.
Flax garden, yeah. And so our students learn the tikanga of harvesting those plants and then using them and processing them and turning them into their artwork. And we had to plant a second one because it's so popular and they're getting used so much.
I can imagine.
Yeah, which is pretty exciting.
And I'm sure people are going way beyond perhaps baskets or anything people might traditionally imagine.
Yeah, well, they've sort of, I guess it's, it's a lot of, in the beginning, I think, Peter Robinson should be here talking about it because he's
notable New Zealand artist.
He's sort of had he's been the guardian, the kaitiaki of those courses, I suppose, over the time that they've evolved, but many people have taught them. So it's a process of, first of all, turning the harakeke into muka, which is the sort of fibrous material. And then so students learn these sort of processes, and then we often will get them to make something quite recognisably traditional in the beginning, but then they really start to go on their own journeys with it, and that's what Peter wants. So for the second half of the course, sometimes the idea of weaving gets expanded into 10 people throwing things across a room and them intersecting across space and turning into these beautiful room-size installations. So it quickly sort of expands into the conceptual, but with this really strong material and well understood foundation.
Really interesting.
It's they're really popular and they're brilliant, and I think that we should offer them outside of the school. At the moment we don't have the resource to do that.
I'm sure it's a departure from what people would imagine would be perhaps a traditional practice at Elam of very Western sort of ways of, I don't know, maybe in my own mind, I
Yeah.
didn't imagine that would be part of your practice there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I guess, I mean...
But why not?
Yeah, why not?
Why
And
not?
also, we've always had students of every
Yeah.
cultural background in the school making their work, so it's work that's always been there. I guess, has it been named in courses before? No, but nothing was named in courses before. Things were quite open, like things were named Studio 1, 2 and 3. So when we decided to name things, it just really made us make it more transparent and more obvious. So it's a good thing to really describe what we're doing, to say, hey, this course does this. It's really great, as opposed to that work might have been happening in other courses, but it might have just been harder to see or harder to talk about. But it's been there all along. Yeah. I mean, there's a long history of ngā toi at Elam. It just might not have been as well described as it is now in some moments. Yeah.
Would you have any advice for anybody wanting to make a career in fine arts? I mean, at this time, in 2025, being the head of our most notable school of fine arts, you're in a good position to say. What would you say to somebody?
Well, I would say not just a career in fine arts, I'd say just a creative career, because I think that's probably a better way to capture the journey, because for some it does become a career in fine arts. Some choose to really work to become a known international artist with galleries, and it definitely happens for a decent amount of our students, but then a lot really clearly choose a different journey. So I'm still a really big believer in coming to art school, as much as, I could easily argue for the opposite, but I actually am a real believer, sincerely, because you find a community, and that's what you need when you're young and you want to enter into the world. You come to art school and you find this incredible community, and you work in this incredibly resourced environment to figure out who you are as a maker. It's a bit of a privilege and a joy, really.
A huge privilege.
Yeah.
So
I would still say on those terms, art school is awesome. I mean, people make their way without that and find community in other ways, but it's definitely a fast ticket into finding a lot of great people, because all of my friends are from art school. Yeah.
Are they?
Yeah.
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 And you're still friends now?
It's like, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, you don't just have your own ideas. All of a sudden, you've got everyone else's ideas to kind of help you. I mean, to collaborate with, to spark other things, haven't you? Otherwise, it's a very lonely journey.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of what art school is. I mean, there's teaching. We teach a lot of content and teach people how to understand some history and context and some current art ideas and some technologies and some ways of making. But a lot of art school is talking to each other. So you learn as much off your peers as you do off the teachers. So, I guess the main mode of teaching is often the crit, which is where we'll sit around and look at an artwork, and everyone will sort of talk about what they see in that artwork. And it's the most incredible education and critical thinking, because it enables you to see how different viewpoints are brought to exactly the same object. Like, I see a glass with water in it, and you may see something else, and we talk about that, and we understand why you might see what you see, and why I might see what I might see, and why it matters, and what it means that it's sitting on this table, in this room, in this country, on this whenua, and we talk about all of those things, that is not a neutral object. That is a loaded contextual...
People bring meaning to it.
Yeah, and that's part of learning, is to understand when you're making art that nothing is neutral. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That seems like a pretty good place to stop. Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you for talking to us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to the Research and Reason podcast. Stay up to date with the Faculty of Arts and Education by following us on social media.